Everybody, this is Alessandro. Welcome back to my channel. This is an extract from one of the lessons I was giving to one of my students where we were talking about how to improve a reference and then not just copy and try to understand what to push. Sometimes a reference might have a good pose already, right? This kind of stuff. So it's not just always straight copy. You need to understand silhouette, line of action, shapes, and things like that. Okay. So for example, here, after we discussed the first poses, to this pose here, obviously the character was very unbalanced and needed to be pushed a lot more forward. On top of that, the line of action of the shoulder need to be less straight and stiff, right? And try to create a most of a contrast in the elbow, right? I think this was something, for example, was in the reference. I thought it was something good that you wanted to keep it, but most important, I wanted to keep the character at the center of the mass. Here, as you can see, for me, what is very important is the diagonal line that more or less he adds, but there are certain area of his blocking that the character look very broken. Or for example, the fact that the character was kind of looking on the ground, where instead it should kind of look up a little bit more, separated the arms to give more of a better contrast. All right. And as you can see here, we start to move to the other pose. You see how the line of action tend to look be very broken, right? Definitely not very appealing. And when I studied the reference, I always simplify. Think about the direction of where the force is coming from and where is it going, right? You see, like it can be a lot more interesting with just a few lines. You can get the point of where the pose should be, like the contrapposto between the hip and the shoulder, right? And those are all things that are kind of really important to me, right? And it's very classic mistake that people tend to do for the most part, right? So even here, right, if you want to do this one, try to group a little bit the line of action of the spine and even the legs. I want to compress both of the legs because I really want to make sure that it's obvious that the character is compressing down before then pushing up in the same poses. And here, for example, it's pushing up. I want the front leg not to be the bend as much anymore. I want to see clearly the spine more in perspective, right? And I was like right here of the character have the poses that he did. There's a lot of negative space here and there, right? I wanted the poses to be very compact, right? And not hunching forward, for example, all right? So there is really a lot of things that could have been improved a lot more and clarify and clean up a lot more, all right? So here, for example, I was trying to discuss some of the other poses. Sometimes we don't necessarily do all of them. We just focus on the main one, right? And here another things I think I want to have more compression because this is kind of anticipation before the strike. And it didn't feel compressed, the poses, because there was a lot of negative space there. And here again, try to think about how to really push the elbow behind, right? In order to give the sense of strength, that sense of dynamism, right? Yeah, see also overall that those poses are not very appealing in a way, right? Okay, so here we start to take a look at the overall shapes of the character, right? See the character here tend to feel very stiff, right, in terms of chest, when instead you want to have a more sideways line of action rather than keeping your character very stiff, especially with the spine being very frontal, right? Sometimes you don't always need to exaggerate the pose to make it over the top all the time. It's not that every single pose needs to be over the top, but it's just about the time simplify the shape. Look about this, the triangle that the feet and the chest created, right? And look how very messy is this pose, right? So sometimes you want to think about those line of action, those shapes that makes your animation really interesting. And if you miss all these, your poses overall tend to look very weak, right? So it's important to have very clear what you can do and what you should focus all right? Starting with the line of action of the spine, how to connect them very well, because you can see them from my sketch, and then eventually what he will do later on, that the line of action from the spine to the legs is a lot more organic. What he did on the first pass of posing, he was very disconnected, right? Very abrupt line going from one point to another, all right? Okay, this is another part where I was sharing that the fact that the silhouette is not very clean. All right. Sometimes that I try to avoid 90-degree angle for the legs just because it doesn't look very appealing, and I focus on the elbow going front of overlapping, then the other arms kind of going straight. As you can see, guys, this looks a lot more appealing, right? This one wasn't too bad, this pose, right? I think this is definitely a lot better compared to other stuff. Can still be improved a little bit more, but definitely here is another one where you can see you don't see the torso. You see, I was talking about the triangle between the the arm and the leg, right? You see this kind of line of action will flow a lot better. If you can see, instead of his knee are opening on the outside, where it doesn't look so appealing. If you can see my sketch, even done with a few simple line, okay, it looks a lot more appealing. Okay, guys. So again, just want to give you a hint of usually how I conduct my my lesson as well with my students, is how important we spend talking about shapes, line of action, how to really push the reference. And sometimes the reference, there are moments where some line of action is already there and you have to just push it a bit more. I know sometimes you have to rebuild something entirely different, depends of the reference that you choose as well. But I can guarantee you, as you can see, a lot of people, even though when they have a reference that looks quite good, they still struggle to achieve very strong and good posing. Okay, it's not as easy to say, okay, I can just copy the reference. It's not like that. You need to study the anatomy, the shapes, and what makes a good poses, right? It's not just you can just sit and do that. All right, hope you enjoy. See you next time, guys.